I'm your MC. I'm Sophia Baumert. I'm a lecturer in the English department, and I'm really excited about this event. As soon as I encountered Sue and her poetry, I was like, I have to teach it, and I've gotten the opportunity to teach it in my literature and the environment elective this semester. We just discussed the book on Monday, and so my students are here. And yeah, I'll leave my own introduction of that and get started. So on behalf of the Departments of English and Political Science, the programs in American Studies and Urban Sustainability, the Honors Academy, the Center for the Study of Brooklyn, the LGBTQ+ Center, and the Ethel R. Wolf Institute for the Humanities at Brooklyn College, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's event again. Thank you for being here. You're in for a treat. Today, we're celebrating the publication of What to Carry into the Future by Brooklyn College's Susan Landers. Let's give Sue a round of applause and congratulations. So before we start, 2 quick announcements. If you're a student and did not sign in on the way in, please sign in. There's sign-in sheets at the entrance on the way out. And this event is being recorded, and the recording will be available in the Wolf Institute's YouTube channel. So we're going to start with Sue reading from her lovely volume, and then she'll be joined in conversation by Professor Celina Su, and then we'll end with time for comments and questions from the audience at the end. So with that, let me introduce our speakers. Sue Landers is the author of 4 poetry collections. Her latest, What to Carry into the Future, emerged from riding every New York City subway from end to end. Her poems have appeared in Poem a Day, the Brooklyn Rail, and elsewhere. She was the former executive director of Lambda Literary and currently serves as director of content strategy here at Brooklyn College. And then Celina Su is the Marilyn J. Gittell Chair in Urban Studies at the CUNY Grad Center, as well as Professor of Political Science at Brooklyn College. Her latest book is Budget Justice on Building Grassroots Politics and Solidarities from Princeton University Press. Her other publications include Streetwise for Book Smarts, Grassroots Organizing and Education Reform in the Bronx, and pieces in the New York Times Magazine, Harper's, and Plus One, and elsewhere. So with that, Sue, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for coming. You know, as I was getting ready for this event, I have to appreciate the Wolf staff who did so much arranging for this. There's a lot goes into an event like this, so shout out to the Wolf staff. And also want to thank the students in the room who have been engaging with my book this week. Very eager to hear your thoughts and questions later. It's a big deal to have your book adopted by a college professor. So it means a lot to me, and I'm really grateful to you, Sophia, for bringing the book into your class. Also need to acknowledge that I am a total fangirl for Professor Celina Su. Celina is a wonderful poet in her own right and a rad thinker, and it's very cool to be doing this event with you, so thank you for that. And then lastly, so, you know, I've probably given hundreds of poetry readings. I have never given a poetry reading in the place of my employment. So we're going to see how this goes. Worlds are colliding. So with that, I'm going to read from What to Carry into the Future. So this book is a triptych to New York City. And it emerged from me riding the trains from end to end. And in the 3 sections, the first is set by and large in the subway or at the neighborhoods at the end of each line. The second section of the book is set largely here in Brooklyn. I live in Prospect Park South near the Beverly Avenue Q, the Beverly Q station. And so I took these long walks, and the second part is all about this neighborhood. And then the last section is about New York City waterways. And I'm going to read from the first and last sections of this book. The first poem in this book is a long, like a chapbook-length poem in its own right about the trains. And it's called My Quotidian Icon. And I think what you need to know about it is it was written largely in 2017. So the references in the book are really kind of set in that time and what was going on in that time. I wrote the trains in order, A to Z, and then interspersed 1 to 7. I almost said 1 to 9, but I'm not that old in the order. 1 to 7 throughout the trips. So this is my quotidian icon. You know, this might be a love letter. These may be my vows. About that prenup we never ironed out. Doesn't matter. New York, you always win. You always get whatever you want. But I can still lay tracks inside you, reinscribe in lines the old names we have for each other. Atlantic, Pacific, how the maiden names stick, familiar as an ocean along the elevated track. Panaderia, Taekwondo, the Verrazano, dungarees and smokestacks, nail salon and scaffold, right down to your edges where the dragonflies and sunflowers wave monstrous to tomatoes, outside the chop shop, an empty Listerine bottle and the smell of fresh-baked bread over Coney Island Creek, where the men gutting porgies for chum turn to me and say, they are big and beautiful, just like you. Under a summer sky quilted by cranes, a woman tears open an air conditioner. And it's a beautiful day for a game of running around and around to get home. The doors open, and a man says he doesn't want to sleep on the train anymore. The doors open, and a stranger asks me if I have children. And you know, I stopped myself from telling her that I was so busy working, I hardly noticed when the blood stopped releasing from my body how far away I was from the workings of my body while I was working in a city full of bodies moving like a hurricane. The doors open and the streets are flooded in Texas. The doors open and people are waving from rooftops. The doors open and the president pardons a sheriff who videotaped women in bathrooms. The women arrested for not being born here. The doors open for a man in a, I'm not arguing, I'm just explaining, I'm right, t-shirt. And a woman asks me for help with her naturalization test. She asks me to read aloud the words, are you willing to take up arms in defense of this country? The doors open and a man in a Vegas hotel room kills 60 people with 15 semi-automatic rifles. Last night, there was a hurricane, then another one. Some of this isn't metaphorical. Look up before it gets darker. The clouds are gorgeous and damning. To get far away by not stopping underground in the dark, I'd like that, to be like that, to be so far gone, but then the horn blares on the track, a long wail, warnings down the car that are staggering, warnings for the workers in the tunnels working to keep the water at bay from us, the we who curse the slowing down, the stumbling that trips up the pace of our rushing, that keeps us at bay from this earth and our bodies. 10 days before the hurricane, the president lifted restrictions protecting cities from floods. This isn't prophecy, it's design. Climate change deniers want enough of us, at risk enough, that they will never grow rich enough selling us their toxic solutions. A flashing of lights, a clattering of tongues. This local just turned express. What are the words to that song again? I crashed your car into the bridge. I don't care. I love it. Rain slick city, city of vanish and stick. I just want to ride your rocking with all the other empaths and nanas, witches and cynics, the pharmacists, the squatters, the haulers of stuff, as if there were no time left but all of it, a continuous present, attending to the unanswerable questions of this city. Later, in Coney Island, I meet the great-granddaughter of the man who made the rides, the whip, and the tickler, Lisa, with shooting stars down her arms. She tells me how Trump's father bought Steeplechase Park in the 1960s and threw this big party where bikini-clad women handed out bricks to bust out the glass of the park's magnificence. He told his guests to break Steeplechase Park into bits. The hurricanes approaching the Caribbean this week have surpassed all established parameters. Winds so strong they are technically beyond Category 5, and yet there is no Category 6. There is no Category 6, and yet the 185-mile-per-hour winds of Irma exist. Chaos might mean without a library, dumbstruck, a leveling. Chaos, an unpredictable behavior appearing random, can actually be owed to small changes in conditions over time. I'm riding a train, the G train, whose window is held in place with duct tape. I remember it was after 9/11, or maybe it was the blackout, or maybe it was Hurricane Irene or Sandy, I forget, but I remember they told us to buy duct tape. I don't know what we were supposed to use it for. Everything, I suppose. And we are. Rocking at Atlantic Pacific back again at the impossible meeting of oceans, an alert on my phone announces an attack downtown. 8 people plowed down on a bike path by a man in a truck on Halloween. And someone says, there was never a better time for a parade. We are getting so good at living in grief. 2 women sit down where a man had just been sleeping beneath an ad for knowing your rights. One arm of the state advising how not to get struck down by a different arm of the state. I'm on my way to a rally for elevators, most stations without them, even in evacuation zones where people are expected to go in the event of a hurricane. As the protesters gathered, a man yells from a passing car, "Job haters!" And I knew I was free. Maybe this time is completely unreal. Maybe this time is the realist, like the crowd at Times Square breaking out spontaneously into Bodak yellow. A bald man grimaces as he rises from his seat at 36th Street, where 4 years from now, a man will open fire on the train during rush hour. And yet somehow, I still have faith that there will always be another train behind this one. Up the stairs and over the ridge, I'm eating chicken shawarma with lemonade for $11 in Bay Ridge when a cop over his loudspeaker says, "Go back to school," and 4 boys on the overpass break into a run. All of a sudden, it's Christmas time and 2 days since a bomb went off in that grim little hallway in Times Square. Do you know the one? The one with the messages in the ceiling? Go to work, go to bed, etc. It's too real for some people. They can't stand it. They can't stand to look up. Today, Times Square smells like wet paint, a glossing over. A woman on the S train says, "I need a seat. I have cancer. You can't tell by looking at me, but I do. Do you want to see my report?" A man in a "I'm broke, bitch" t-shirt sits under Major Jackson's poem that reads, "All we want is a metropolis of Sundays, an empire of hand-holding." The woman with cancer tells me to write about all the nice people on the subway, okay? It's 10:40 a.m. on December 5th, 2017, where 7th Avenue and Broadway meet, and the ads are flashing, "I need help." Then, "Do you want to go to the M&M store?" A bride in the crosswalk gets her picture taken beneath the sign over the McDonald's that reads "Impeach." It's a spectacle bundle. Like trash inside an oyster shell, this little iridescent map of survival. How many more stops? So many of us doing the math from here to there. I'm on my way to the cemetery, where a security guard tells me this place gets smaller the longer you're here. I'm eating a fried fish sandwich for $13 on City Island across from a potter's field, where in 2 years, 1 in 10 dead New Yorkers will be buried after COVID surges. But before all that happens, candy striper smokestacks and a song down the car, I'm high on elevated tracks. The doors open and Queens is a library. I'm blushing under the sheer shiny globe of it all, beyond the sunny side of Hellgate, past the Junction, the Reservoir, and Silver Cup Studios. This poem is a time plaza, a cathedral of vaulted grime for anyone who has ever found, borrowed, stolen, or simply made the time to take the long way round. I take the Q to the S, to the C, to the J, and still get to Jamaica with 7 minutes to spare to catch the last Z train of the day. And there, I wait until an old gray train pulls into the station, my last train. But on its emblem is the letter J. So I asked the conductor if there's a J behind this one, and he says, this J is the Z. It's the same train. They're all the same. Get on. So that's my quiz video icon. So when you ride the train to the end of the line, often where you end up over and over again is water. So we live on islands. And so as I was writing this book, it started to dawn on me that I really needed to have a waterway component. How do you talk about New York without talking about the water that surrounds us? So in 2023 and 2024, I set out to write different poems to different New York City waterways. Many of them I hadn't even been to before. And this section is set up as a crown of sonnets. Crown of Sonnets is 15 sonnets that are kind of, well, they're supposed to be like intricately connected, but mine are loosely connected. And each of my sonnets is preceded by a contextualizing prose paragraph. I felt it was important the thing about the sonnet form is it's really crystallized, very short. You really kind of have to pack everything in there. And in case folks aren't familiar with some of these places, some of these waterways, I wanted to provide some kind of context or broader picture using this prose format intro. So I'm going to read a couple of these. This section is called Water Finds a Way. Atlantic Ocean. In her poem about the Mississippi, Lucille Clifton considers how in water, the past is always flowing. Once a barrier island in the ocean, by the early 20th century, Coney Island had been transformed into a peninsula attached to Brooklyn by landfill. The beach isn't quite original either, with its sand deposited and replenished over time, held in place by structures perpendicular to the shore that protect against erosion. A 2023 study found that it's one of the fastest sinking areas of the city. It's got a history full of speculative real estate, predatory thrills. The ocean's backdrop, the iconic wonder wheel, unusual for its swinging track where carriages roll free as the wheel rotates. This rare type of Ferris wheel, one of only 3 in existence, is called eccentric. In the light, in the lush, in the lushness of light in summer, in the sometimes when there is time in the nothing, no thing but in water, at the edges, at the shelf, I come to read it, the ocean, a music impossible as the wheel turns and uplifting, glinting in its blue spin, going around and around by the shore, a wonder. Its gears pressing into old grooves like a known thing, but still a new thing. This clicking, that swinging, that makes me feel like I could always have, that makes me feel like I could never lose, this feeling of freedom. Coney Island Creek. In an essay about New York City's water supply systems, Celina Su wrote, To take after water is to adapt to context, but also to thirst for depth, for belonging. When we are all relations, the future is estuary. Estuary, a passage from the Latin to boil, a rapid phase of transition. Coney Island Creek, the last remnant of a salt marsh estuary, connects residential and industrial areas, marshland and parks, birds, people, and bay. A collage. Polluting industries left a toxic legacy, and as recently as 2016, a local apartment complex was still dumping raw sewage into the creek. Attempts to get it declared a Superfund site have so far been unsuccessful, but the community continues its fight. The Superfund program today has less funding than it did in 1981. Even so, the park where the creek meets the bay is an active gathering spot where blue meets blue and ease. Estuary with fish tang of funk, pluff mud, decayed spartina grass and sewage. I smell the creek before I see it, greeted by an egret flying low to its perch. Nearby, ship ribs rise, a ghostly flotilla, underwater wrecks tucked inside this soft barrier of salt marsh. People in the water too, fishermen, swimmers, a baptism. Volatile organic compounds can't keep them away. The seekers, they play while the black locust trees chatter beside this once tidal strait, precarious, resilient, unfurling. Bronx River. At Concrete Plant Park beside the Bronx River, volunteers maintain an edible and medicinal foodway, a public space for legal foraging, a place to refuel or to heal. Their work is a continuation of decades of community organizing to restore the river, reclaim access to the waterfront, and reconnect neighborhoods long divided by highways. The park is in the South Bronx, an epicenter of environmental racism, not too far from the river's mouth, where after 23 miles, the river joins with the East River, a confluence, a coming together at Hunts Point, home to the largest food distribution center in the nation and majority supplier of the city's fresh food. After digging through and digging out decades of design division, the tires, the toxins, debris, the borough of the Bronx is reconnected in places to its namesake, the river. To dredge the river, to bridge the land, to access the Momachog and swamp roads. In the shadow of the 6th train, a palimpsest. Orange silos emptied of concrete, now sculptures by the boat launch and chessboards, markers for a bike path and a foodway, a trailway to forage wild resources, chestnut or goji berry, bergamot for mood, chickweed for cough, some mugwort to ward off fatigue. Jamaica Bay. Over the 20th century, Jamaica Bay, a wetland estuary as large as Manhattan, lost most of its marshland. Marshes, reservoirs of carbon, sponges for flood, protect us from harm. Scientists predicted the bay's marshland would be gone completely by 2025 without intervention, which is now underway, but progress is slow. Erode, restore. A park overlooking the bay, named for Shirley Chisholm, the first Black woman to run for president, was completed in 2021. The park had been envisioned nearly 70 years earlier, a history of promises and takebacks, dumping and remediation. The paleoecologist Dorothy M. Petit calls marshes archives for climate change. In the muck, a history of human decisions. As seen from this hill by the bay, ziggurats of trash, now pitch pine and willow. Sandy bottom beach recovered from sludge. The soils of the bay run dark gray to gray silt, clay silt to sandy, silt loam, malone loam to peat. Concrete, the birds clam slamming ground. The bay in recovery from marsh loss. its marshes long drowning in place. This park was first marshland, then landfill. Landfill, now capped and off-gassing. Its grasses grow back after mowing, a process of returning after injury, an attempt to recoup what's been lost. And then finally, Atlantic Ocean. Again, there's Clifton, considering water the great circulation. Eccentricity is a measure of how much an elliptical path deviates from a perfect circle. The eccentricity of a line is infinite. Elliptical can be a leaving out. I don't mean to sound cryptic. What I mean to say is that the city's imperfect and more than it could ever contain. A bedrock holding up what is loose. A history of human decisions, as many as there are ways to love a city. Yes, these are my vows. To move a handful of sand from one hand to another. To repeat. The water is the same water and still is new under the pavilion that smells like salt and sunscreen and pee, where an old man passes a strawberry to another man who nods in thanks. I am here because the ocean is there, to look out onto the horizon, to see from the edges of the city a vista, that which extends beyond what I know today, and to make the quiet choices of living. Thank you.
Thanks to everyone for being here to celebrate this beautiful book. I love it so much, and thank you for having me. So I was curious, you mentioned that that parts of my quotidian icon were written in 2017, 2018, but parts feel very much of the pandemic. Also, can you tell us a little bit about how this book came together? Like, I was curious, like, did it start off as a project, like I'm gonna ride the trains and see what comes out, or how?
Pretty much. Yes. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
So, yes. So in 2017, I decided that I wanted to take on a project. I've lived in New York since 1999, and I love mass transit. I grew up in a family that only took mass transit, not a family of drivers in Philadelphia. And I live here for many reasons, one of which is the trains and the agency and the mobility that the trains provide. And so I wanted, since moving here, I was just like, I want to ride every train, you know. And I was between jobs, and I had some time. And so I decided to ride every train, and I used the train as a studio space, and I would write, and then I would get off at the end and take these little tours of the neighborhood. And so I did that for a couple months, and I had these big notebooks with all of these notes, and I converted the notes into singular poems, largely for like each one. So there was like an A train poem and a B train poem, and I did that. And then I went back to work. So I got another job, and it was very time consuming, and it took kind of all of me, and I stopped writing. So I put the project on hold, and I came back to those poems 5 years later, and I didn't love them. I was just like, there are pieces of these I like, but I'm not sure if this is really kind of showcasing the kind of full spectrum and momentum that I wanted to get at.
Oh, momentum is sort of the word. It hits at what I was thinking of in my head, because, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm asking selfish questions as a writer who did not go through an MFA, of like, I give myself assignments too, but this work is like, the writing is so good and compelling. So what was your editing process? like I was curious, did they have the short lines? Because I could feel myself propelling forward as I was reading the first section. And you know, sometimes these research projects are fruitful, but still feel like the conceit is too heavy-handed. It's a little bit gimmicky, but this felt like the form and the content really, it's sung. So how did you edit that?
So, yes, it was, the singular poems were gimmicky, and I think I picked up on that. And so what I did was I looked at the singular poems, and I said, what if I get rid of everything I don't like? So I kind of like Marie Kondo.
But how did you figure out what you didn't like? Was it like, does it spark joy?
Kinda. So I went through each poem, and I really killed the darlings, killed things I didn't like, killed things.
Do you remember the darlings where you're like, oh, this is so precious and good, but it doesn't fit here?
No, just gone. And so but then what remained? So I just like slash, and then it's just literally put all the documents together into one long thing. And so I only had words, phrases, ideas that I enjoyed, and then it hit me that it needed to be shorter lines for pace. It's like it's like I want this to be kind of like this. When you're on the train, even if the train is going slow, like a lot happens. There's a lot of different people coming into the mix. You know, like there's different smells, there's different sounds, like so much can happen. And I was like, how do I embody pace? And I thought the short line would do it. And so everything just started to get cut. And when things are on short lines, then like more things get cut, and then it just gets kind of faster and faster and faster.
And the juxtaposition too, of the person wearing the t-shirt under major jacket. I mean, you giving us a sense of visual direction was helpful, but then also, you know, city life of when in prismatic ways the different sorts of details seem to be commenting on one another or in conversation.
Yeah, totally. Well, you do a little bit of this in your own work too, right? When you, I'm thinking about, you know, the work that you did with poems about Chinatown, where you kind of like incorporated different interviews or like different things that you were seeing.
Yes, but I have to say, these were a few poems, I think some of which ended up getting published in The Believer, but it was partly by assignment. From the Economic Hardship Reporting Project, which is a journalism outfit that was co-founded by Alyssa Court, who's a journalist who focuses on issues of the working class and is also a poet, and Barbara Enright before she passed. And
what was the assignment?
Poems about Chinatown based on my oral histories, but fact check.
Yeah.
And so I went back to the folks who spoke English well enough to read my poems, and
they gave you notes?
Yeah. They mostly gave me like, oh, I would like appreciation, which is like part of the one of the lovely aspects of like participatory research. The social science research I do is with and not just on folks. But I'm getting like, oh, I wouldn't have put it that way, but it was sort of like I took a turn of phrase they used and I extended the metaphor. But it was funny to fact check poems. So, but they fact check the spirit rather than the words. So, but that was such a love, like, yeah, but this, I think that's another aspect of this, like, what are our roles, jobs, I don't know what it is, as
responsibilities
as inhabitants of a city and witnesses of so much going on around us. I mean, I really appreciated how, like, from chicken shawarma to the doubles and the exact prices, I could figure out where you were. This is a book of this place and of movement.
The food piece is important actually. So because when you ride, some of these lines are really long, and so I had to kind of plan out like what was going to happen when I got off. So when I got off at the end, because I really wanted to get off at the end and look around. And so before I went on trips, I was just like, okay, so where am I going to get food, and where am I going to use the bathroom? Like that was like part of the research process.
There's that Airbnb map.
It was, I think it was before that
Okay.
time. It may have been, but yeah. Maybe I didn't have unlimited data. I'm not sure.
No,
It's
I
more
don't
like
have
cheap
unlimited
eats because
data,
again,
so
because I was
yeah.
out of work. So the doubles were out in Ozone Park. You were like, and I was like, oh, let me pull in like the prices and make sure that like folks know like how much things cost over this time.
I mean, just like this constant combination of the material and the emotional, I really appreciated. So you mentioned the crown of sonnet. You told us a little bit about the first section, but I'm still curious, like, what about the second section, and how did you decide on the crown of sonnets?
So the second section that I didn't read from it kind of came out of walking in this neighborhood and thinking a lot about trees. So New York City has this wonderful resource called the New York City Street Tree Map. It's this old database. It's super kludgy because it's like on the city website. And so it's not the best user experience, but it has every single tree in the city, and you can like look it up. And so I started to use it on these walks to identify these trees, and I wanted to have a counterpoint to the fast subway poem. Have it like, what would it mean to write an incredibly slow, meditative poem? So the second poem is super slow, like trees, right? Just like trees observing over like the course of several decades. And so when I got to the last part, so fast, slow, and I was like, I want to have a flow state. And so I was like, let me move into like neither fast nor slow, and let me associate that with water. And because I had done 2 long poems, I wanted to kind of push myself into thinking, well, the challenge of writing a short poem is very real, because there's no place for slack. And so I was like, well, let me write these sonnets so I could really kind of crystallize these different waterways.
So the sonnet as a specific short form. So were they long, and then you had to like whittle them down to the essence, or?
I went into it knowing they'd be 14 lines and really tried to write them as 14 lines. The 14 lines is pretty much the only quality of the sonnet that's
It wasn't
retained.
like the turn after 6 months. I can't remember.
So some of them have a turn. So the thing about the sonnet is it's like it goes, either like 8 and then like 6, and there's like a turn. There's like a sense turn. Some of them have a turn. Some of them don't. They don't follow a rhyme pattern. And the notion of the crown is it's supposed to be 15 sonnets where the last line becomes the first line of the next poem, so that they're all like braided. Instead, what I did was I went back over the whole book and tried to find some recurring themes, words, or something like that, and then have the crown of sonnet almost be like a double braid back across the whole book. So I was kind of like trying to make the crown of the whole book. So I was thinking about the concepts of circles, crowns, repetition, more than the any kind of strict adherence to the actual concept of crown.
But it also feels like a different mapping.
Yeah.
Both with the.
I love maps.
With
Maps are so cool.
I love maps too.
Yes.
With the subway lines at the bottom, and I remember one piece at the Queens Museum one time where someone asked the artist, performance conceptual art, someone asked a bunch of passers-by, how do I get to this place? And to write it down on Post-its, and then the map was just like basically their directions to figure out. But like there's, but that's our lived reality. There's also, I can't remember who said it now, but there's also that clip of map is not the territory. But for us, how we experience it is a real thing. So.
I love that came through actually, because so I hadn't been to a bunch of these waterways, and the way that I picked them was I looked at Google Maps. I looked at Google Maps and I was like, what's in Queens? Let me go into Queens and let's find a creek I hadn't been to or a bay or whatever, and kind of using the maps to kind of figure out which one should I go visit. So I think that is coming through probably.
And also, I will say that when you were talking about trees as slow, the phrase only right now as you were talking came to me compared to the hustle, suddenly I read trees as anti-capitalist, just in how you're talking about it right now, because so much of the book is also about work and the hustle
There's
that
a
we
lot of
all have to
Yeah.
abide by.
Yeah, so the tree poem was written while I was in recovery from work burnout and COVID burnout. So again, I was between jobs, and I was recovering from career burnout. So I was very, very tired. I had like physical injuries, and so I had this experience where I was walking a Flatbush. So I had this injury in my leg, and I was walking a Flatbush, and I was just like, how? My leg hurts. And I was like, well, what would happen if I walk a little slower? I walk a little slower. And I was just like, my leg hurts less. And I was just like, what would happen if I walked even slower? I was like, oh, my leg hurts even less. And so then I'm like at a crawl's pace on Flatbush. People were like, are you okay? And I was like, oh, like this is putting rest into practice. This is putting kind of like anti-grind into practice, like a physical practice, walking down the street. And so like that is absolutely infused in that meditation. Like what happens if there is a line in here, just like slow the fuck down. You know, just really just like slow everything down. And when you think you're like not slow enough, it's like slow down further. And then what becomes possible in that. And for me, what became possible in the second section was like attention. Like there were all these things to suddenly attend to. You know, these various gardens and these leaves and these sounds and the people on the street and all this stuff too. That became visible upon slowing down.
So, sort of, my mind is going in a bunch of different directions. My background is actually not in political science, it's in urban planning. I just got hired in political science, but like just in terms of the importance of trees. In a lot of cities, unfortunately, the formerly red line districts tend to have a lot more parking lots and a lot fewer trees, even now, almost 100 years after Federal Housing Authority redlining. Redlining means the practice by the federal government that rated certain neighborhoods D, the lowest grade, that they traced in red lines whenever they had immigrant or African American households, basically guaranteeing decades of disinvestment. But even now, formerly redlined neighborhoods are sometimes 30 degrees warmer on a hot day during a heat wave than neighborhoods that were in the 1930s rated A. So so much built into this attention to trees. So we have transit, trees, and water. It's your own policy platform, like of like essential commons.
Yes. Yes.
So
Make it so.
It's like Mamdani has rent-frees, childcare, buses, food paths.
Subways, trees, and waterways. And access to the waterways is super interesting to me because this book started in 2017. Many of the places that I'm writing about in 2023, 24 were not accessible in 2017. So Charlotte Chisholm Park was not open, on Jamaica Bay. There's a bunch of access now at the Bronx River that was not open in 2017. So it's very fun to encounter the city as new over and over again. And so I was able to access waterways only because of like decades of community organizing to make water accessible for recreation instead of just like the highway, like so many like highways kind of cut off access to the water.
So maybe this is a related question. I was curious about, just because maybe it's the idea of it, I personally find writing about nature an intimidating thought. It seems, am I going to end up resorting to cliches? How did you decide on writing in terms of nature, climate change, especially in the context of the city, and dealing with the more than human? I have to admit, I think I probably have a human bias in my writing.
Yeah, it's super shocking to me that I wrote nature poems. Like, this is very out of character, and I think I didn't realize how much nature was in the poem, particularly in the subway poem, until I had taken that gap and then like looked at it again. And then, of course, like climate change was everywhere in those poems because we were experiencing climate change and hurricanes. It's part of our daily life. You know, it's very much of the here and now. And so only by coming back to the work after years away did I see it with fresh eyes, and it was just this like, oh gosh, like there's tons of hurricanes in here. And so that's what kind of was my into talking about nature.
Given that we're at your place of employment,
Yes.
and you write and you work with language in different ways, I'm curious as to why you keep coming back to poetry. I have to say, even your contextual poems,
The prose is super poetic.
Yeah, to sound out a line of inquiry.
Yeah.
Why do you personally come back to poetry? I really appreciated how this felt so political in a way that does not feel didactic or prescriptive. But how do you decide on which genres and how you write a certain way for your pay the bills job and for different personal lives?
Yeah. So I want to ask you that same question, but I will answer it first. So I'm writing in a kind of style that has been called like a documentary poetics or investigative poetics, where you're doing research of whatever kind and pulling in that information into the poetry. And what I really love about that form is, and it's like a hybrid form, it's like this mixed form. And what I love about it is I think that prose can get at facts. Prose is really good at like relaying facts, and poetry is good at feeling. And I want to put both of those things together. I want to smash both of those things together. And this form, these hybrid forms, this investigative poetic form, allows me to do both of those things simultaneously instead of going back and forth. I can just smash them together. So I like that. But so in Celina's book of nonfiction, Budget Justice, which is terrific, which is a nonfiction book, very accessible to lay people, but it's about budgets. And it's about making budgets transparent and how the New York City budget in particular is not very transparent, and but they could be, that they could be these moral documents. They could reflect the collective needs of city dwellers, and how do we go about kind of creating budgets and advocating for budgets that can serve collective needs. And so it's about that, you know, serious stuff. And within every chapter, it feels like nearly every chapter, there's some reference to a poet. And either there's like an actual lines of verse, or a poet taking on a topic, and it like lifts up your subject matter. And I don't think I've ever seen that in like a book of political science before. So like, how do you do it? And why do you do it?
I don't have an articulated answer. I want to think about this more. I have to say that the beginnings of my thinking on it are that I don't write poems about romantic relationships. My poems are also about cities. They reflect the same preoccupations I always have. And so I've been thinking about poetry sort of, as you were saying, regarding docu-poetics as a mode of inquiry, rather than a mode of dissemination. I find that, and maybe what you were saying about feelings, like, what are the subtexts and informal rules at work that are getting me down, or that I'm thinking about, like that notion of interiority and subtext. I feel like maybe just trying to write things out in non-necessary sentence form. Sometimes I end up writing prose poems, but helps me think through social movements or policy making, the same things that I'm usually studying, but I end up maybe dwelling on different insights. So I do have this idea that I can't tell if I'm going to interview bureaucrats or make them do write poems with me. I was like, what if we all wrote, I don't know, a persona poem as Icarus? When did we feel like we got too ambitious and we got burned? I feel like we would learn a little bit about how City Hall operates if we ask the different commissioners. I don't know. But I do feel like there's something about complexity in essence where I was like, there's no way I have to sneak, and there's no way I'm gonna leave out this line of poetry. I need to sneak it in somehow. So it
was very artfully done. I loved it.
Well, but part of it had to do, I have to admit, with practicality and political economy. Just that the publisher was like, I don't think we have enough money for that many epigraphs. So epigraphs.
For permissions?
Yeah, for permissions.
Epigraph.
It's on the headstone. Okay,
Epigram.
Yeah. Epigrams.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, shall we move?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do you have one more question for Sue? Or
No.
Okay, great. I hate to interrupt a really amazing conversation, but I'm sure everyone has lots of their own questions too. So this way we have a good amount of time for Q&A, and then at the very end I'll save a minute so that Professor Su can do a little raffle of books, and then at the end, just again, any students who are here, if you can make sure you've signed in, and students from my class that when we finish, if you would hang back a minute so we can take a picture with Sue. I'd like to do that. But let's open it up for questions.
First of all, thank you for inviting me. I was curious about the title of the book. Could you say a little bit about that and why you selected that?
So that is a line of text that's in the second poem about the trees. I was thinking about as I was like recovering from burnout, I was thinking about like what I needed to let go versus so what am I going to carry of history and knowledge with me moving forward, particularly kind of like carrying the body versus what I was going to let go. And so there's a line about like every day we decide what to carry into our future. And as I was thinking about titles of the book, I kind of read the whole manuscript and I was like, oh shoot, I think that's it. In part because this book travels through time, I think it's very much engaged with notions of both history and present and future, so it seemed to kind of like bring it all together.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So that was beautiful. I thought the first poem that you read also felt like is the first thing in recent weeks that I've heard that made me feel politically soothed or just like held. I don't know, it was really moving, so thank you. So I'm fascinated to know how this is within your corpus of work. So is this the first kind of docu-poetics you've done? Is it the first investigative poetics you've done? It also is not always true that a poetry book is so through composed, right? So I'm interested in whether or not you've written books before that are individual poems that are then gathered in the collection, or, you know, so can you tell us a little bit about your
So
own
I'm a project poet. I love a project, I love a book length project. So I have 4 books, each of them are a project. Came out of thinking about like an entire thing as opposed to singular poems. My last book was about the neighborhood that I grew up in Philadelphia called Germantown, and it was my step into investigative docu-poetics. And so now I'm like, and I've always been like obsessed with places. So I feel like this like poetry of place, documented poetics is like my jam for a little bit. So this is the second in that. And it totally made possible by having done this work before. It's very different from that book, but I wouldn't have been able to do this if I had done the previous.
I will say that I feel like it's such a good excuse to talk to people or to dig around a little bit. Like, like, I live in Prospect Heights, and I noticed that at Underhill and Prospect, there's a playground, and across the street, there are buildings that are a little bit askance. They're like 45 degrees off the street grid, and I just sort of didn't take the time to dig into it until someone who's a jazz composer named Chase Elodia said, oh, I'm doing a song cycle of different Brooklyn neighborhoods based on Michel de Certeau's chapter 3 of yes, like the Walking the City one.
Oh, yeah.
And do you want to do one on the neighborhood? And I'm like, but that's why I asked the question about gimmicks of conceits, because yours is so good. I tried and rejected so many conceits that ended up feeling too gimmicky for me. I was like, do I write one line of observation per block? It didn't work.
Yeah.
But what ended up working was using the poem project as an excuse to dig deep. I found out on an old map online that it's an old Lenape line that marked the property lines from Jamaica down Flatbush, which was a Flatbush, to Broadway up to Albany. So it's just like when you said palimpsest, it's like there's so much poetry around us. I wish I didn't need a poetry project to pay more attention to it in my everyday life, but that's one of the gifts that poetry gives, I think.
Yeah, Carl. And then, I see one of my students here, so
A student?
let's go to my students and then I'll go to you. Nor, and then Annalise, and then Carl.
I really love the conversation we were talking about of like investigating poetry, because this book felt like a very accurate combination of something like research-wise, and there's so much emotion in it, and I think the train rides now kind of feel more like blocking out than letting in, and reading my quotidian icon was really felt accurate to someone like me or people I know, what a train ride can feel like, and what you can notice, and the things you paid attention to. I was hoping to know if a message to a reader could be something like pay attention, and through giving things attention, maybe build empathy and something like that, or like what was like a message you were looking?
That sounds like a great message. Yeah, that sounds really great. I think one of the things that I have always really appreciated about riding the train with other people is how, you're right, people are closed off and we're protecting our space. But I think a lot of the times when I ride the train, I'm also very much aware of how good we are at protecting our space, most of the time. So I understand terrible things can happen on the train, but most of the time, folks are very good at kind of knowing what personal space is, when it gets crossed. And so we're always in this act of a dynamic awareness of one another, even if it's unspoken. If you can tap into that, you can feel it. It's remarkable. Okay, so how many know I've cried on the train? When you cry on the train, it's a rite of passage. And you can cry on the train, and because you're anonymous, and people can kind of leave you alone, and you can just kind of cry on the train, and that's awesome. But sometimes, if you appear upset on the train station, I've appeared upset, and someone came up and was like, "Are you okay?" And so I think when you look up, I think that's kind of a takeaway. Just look up, and then what happens in that looking up.
If I can just add something that we talked about in class, the line that I'm terrible at memorizing lines of poetry, so I don't know exactly what it was, but in Sidewalk Naturalist, which is the middle one about trees, you say something about once you had the name for it, you saw it everywhere, and then hearing you talk about that part of that poem was you using the New York City tree maps. That helps me understand more. But I don't know, what you were just saying made me think about that line.
Totally, yeah. I mean, Yeah, once you know the names of certain trees and you can then identify them, you're like, oh my gosh, the London plane tree is everywhere. The thornless honey locust is everywhere, and you start to like spot it. And something about understanding the language of a thing also helps you retain the connection to that thing.
Annalise, yeah.
Hi, thank you for taking the time to do this. This has been really cool to be reading in class and be here. But I have a question specifically about my quotidian icon. It really read to me as like a processing of grief and collective grief and how community plays into that. And you use the word hyperaccumulators, and I really resonated with kind of being a hyperaccumulator of witnessing all these things happening, you know, that just seem to be happening faster and faster. And in our class, we were asked to write the subway and kind of write, you know, with nothing in mind or no intention. And all I could focus on was how many people were on their phones. Yeah. And I was really curious about how, you know, given the context that this was written in 2017 and 2018, you know, we hadn't gone through the pandemic yet, we hadn't gone through Trump's second term yet. Was it something that you noticed and chose not to focus on? Or was it something that just hadn't really been happening yet? Because I feel like it's a collective way of kind of avoiding grief, but we're all so close together.
Yeah.
So I guess it's kind of a two-part question, but I'm curious about what you noticed in that time.
I think I probably just chose to not focus on that aspect because it's like too ubiquitous.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the aspects of this book, and I think my writing in general, is I really want to kind of like lift up the banal and like these like everyday things and kind of imbue them with some kind of like magic and interest. The phone is like a bridge too far. It's just too boring. So I don't bring in the phone. But you're dead on that it's a book about grief, and I didn't realize that until it was kind of done, and I was just like, oh shoot, this is actually all about 9/11. Yeah. I didn't know that I was like processing 9/11 as I was writing this. But the reason I was because like fragments of 9/11 are all in the trains. Yeah. Like at Union Square, that's like that entire wall of less like little names that are like you could just walk right by it and kind of miss it, and it's these people who died. And so like they're in the system, but you can just kind of like block it out. But when you're attending to it, it comes up.
Oh sure, yeah. First, I read the book. I loved it. Great.
Thanks, Carl.
I have a larger question for both of you about when you read poetry. Like, do you have a regular practice? How do you bring that in? And I'm speaking in the middle of the semester. I'm so wiped out. And I wish I'd read more poetry. And do you try to do it regularly? Both of you?
I do. I do have to have like an intentional reading practice. Reading takes time.
Yeah.
And so I kind of go in and out of reading phases. So this month I am reading some poetry. I'm reading Lori Niedecker, who is a poet of place. She writes about Wisconsin. So I'm reading a bunch of Niedecker. But I do have to kind of like make a point, you know. And I also have to read early in the day because by the end of the day I'm too tired.
Yeah.
I'm like too like spent intellectually, emotionally, and so like I can't like attend to the words. But I will read in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you read poetry?
I do, not as often as I would like, mostly during breaks. My kid is 7 and is just starting to read without it being a chore, so that she's getting into reading for the first time. Right now it's like graphic novels, but that means that we all sit around, so it's only been in the past couple months, we all sit around and read for 20 minutes silently right before her bedtime. And because otherwise I'm reading journal articles or things that I need. It's so instrumental, but it's like your middle section. I need your middle section, you know, like I read news items or journal articles and I can barely remember them.
Yeah.
Like they're not seeping, like I need to read book length things. Even though I also appreciate poetry, that sometimes I can read a short piece and it really just speaks to me and I remember it forever. It really starts to sink in. But I found that I can read maybe things that were originally lectures, like right now I'm reading something called Public Things, that was originally a series of lectures, and fiction at night. I don't have the mental capacity to really read closely at night, so
Night's hard.
I have to wait for summer break probably to do it on a consistent basis.
We definitely have time. Oh, amazing, great. So I think we have time for those two questions, Rena and then Brianna.
We discussed this book on Monday, and I noticed that in Water Finds a Way, you start with the Atlantic Ocean, with the poem from Lucille Clinton, and then you end with Atlantic Ocean again, bringing back the poem. So what is the significance of this order? Did you order the different bodies of water in this section in a specific way?
So that's a kind of a loose tie back to the notion of the crown. So I forget the exact rules, maybe you know the exact rule of like what should happen at in your 15th poem. Maybe your 15th poem is made up of every last line, you like put it together, so it's supposed to all connect. So I wasn't gonna do that, but I was gonna have like the Atlantic come back. And Clifton's poem is about the circulation of water, what gets carried in water and memory over time. And then also like a lot of train lines end at Coney Island. So I was there all the time, coming back to Coney Island. And so Atlantic Ocean kind of like figures strongly in the whole book.
And I think part of that question was, how did you decide what order you would put them in between?
Oh yeah. I tried to find words that like connected them. So like eccentricity is in like the second one, and some word in the second one is in the third. I tried to like link them. There's a bunch of Easter eggs. I get kind of like nerdy about like different word things, and like only I think I can appreciate them.
Thank you for being here. I really enjoyed reading the book and kind of just seeing the beauty and simplicity of everyday mundane life. And it was really interesting to also see the train lines that I've taken and kind of those little Easter eggs, like, oh, the bear's on a bridge, and all these little things that you would probably know if you rode the train. I thought it was really interesting when you kind of referenced like 36th Street and then like the COVID burial part. It's like referencing like the past and the future.
Yeah.
How was that for you, kind of beginning to write in 2017 in a different time period, and knowing what you know now and going back and kind of like editing, like how was that for you, the experience?
I think I was kind of choosy about what of the current I wanted to put in, and those just seemed too significant. So, like, again, because I didn't fully kind of appreciate the recurring themes until I kind of came back with fresh eyes. I was also, in addition to hurricanes, I was like, there's a lot of guns in this. And then that terrible mass shooting occurred kind of at the same time. So it's like, okay, like the guns are in the past, the guns are right here. So let me pull those in. And then, also like after I read the tree poem, I was just like, I probably need to say something else about COVID. So it was just like two kind of, it's not quite like a break in the fourth wall, but like a little bit like a break in the rules. It's like this merits being pulled in.
Do you want to?
Oh yeah, so
Thank you for those questions. That was really awesome.
so one little thing is that I have 2 copies of Sue's book, and I love it a lot, but I feel like I can have 1 copy, and then I wanted to raffle off the other copy, and then also I brought in a copy of my book of poetry, also, which is also about cities.
And it's great. It's great.
So something someone did at an event I went to on Monday that I thought I would try to replicate is everyone think about not one potential person in this room who you think should get one of the books. And I'm going to give you half a minute to think, who would you like to nominate? Okay, does anyone have any ideas of like someone you would like to nominate? Oh, raise your hand if you do. So I'm just picking on the first two. So the person in the teal, yeah, the first.
Should I say my nomination?
Yeah.
I'd like to nominate Sule.
Why?
Because I
Oh,
was
should I
fascinated.
say or should you say?
Why were you thinking of nominating her?
So I want to nominate Sule because he's really interested in poetry and is always trying to explore new mediums, and it's working hard to find ways to connect with writing creatively.
Okay, wonderful. And the person in front of you wearing, yeah, go ahead.
I would nominate Gail Naftalin. That's me. Because I don't read a lot of poetry. I really like it when Garrison Keillor reads a poem. And I think, oh, I really like that. I gotta read more poetry. And I really appreciated your reading. And I love the subways and I love the city. And I love that idea. I think I came because you said you rode the subways end to end. So, you know, I think I enjoyed reading the book. And then I give it away.
Well, you can come up and we can decide between the two of you, the two books. But, yeah.
So can we please give Sule her